welcome to a very special Fans Fight Back episode on Pitch Boxing, where I'm delighted to be joined by three very special guests in former boxer and a man who knows all about UCAD in Larry Olabamiwo, with Niall, former Daily Express boxing writer, biographer for Calzaghe and Hatton, and contributes now to Boxing News, and sports lawyer, boxing enthusiast, PED enthusiast in the right way, Israel Cody. How are you all?
All good, thanks.
All good.
We're defending ourselves at all times.
Well, unlike some, which we're going to come on to.
We might be, yeah.
So we're here to discuss what was a very intriguing interview with Conor Benn and Piers Morgan that occurred this week. And so we've got lots of different perspectives, from Larry, who has been involved in this, on the coalface, through to Niall, who's written about it for years, through to Israel, who is an expert in the law and the PED side of things as well. So, open forum, start with you all. What did you make of it?
It should be ladies first, I reckon, Martin.
Well, put it this way, I'm not a United fan, but I didn't think anyone could do as badly with Piers as Ronaldo. And in walks Conor Benn and says, let me show you how this is done, because it from start to finish, I think it was possibly the worst thing he could have done for himself at this point. And I don't know how there isn't someone in his corner, pardon the intentional pun, who isn't saying to him, look, you need someone doing your PR. What you don't need is to go on with a man like Piers Morgan, who is going to run rings around you, which is exactly what he did, without even asking any substantially difficult questions. And I think the big loser from the entire event, because boxing was tuned in, everyone was tuned in, and that's the sport once again is losing out by another car crash of an event surrounding Ben in the last 6 months. Like, this is going on since October.
Yeah,
it's actually getting worse. And I don't know if you guys think there was any redeeming features in it, but I certainly didn't find any.
And I'm interested from your legal perspective, and I realise it isn't a criminal case or anything like that, but from a legal perspective, if you were advising somebody in that situation, would you tell them, while there's an ongoing legal case, and there's talk and threats of suing a board and whoever else, King's College, if that's where they're looking at, pointing fingers, would you advise that person to go on a talk show with Piers Morgan?
So I suppose I certainly wouldn't advise anyone to go on a talk show with Piers Morgan or subject the boxing fans to having to watch it as a result. There are a few things, I suppose. He isn't banned. There isn't a case in being. So if you have someone who may in the future have a case coming up, sometimes you may want them to get a good side out in the public mindset. But ultimately, you certainly would not tell them to go on and make defamatory remarks about a laboratory, which he did. He accused unknown parties to do with the lab of tampering. He used the word tampering, which is a very serious accusation. He threatened to sue the board, but then also said he wouldn't hand them the report he gave to the WBC, which instantly smacked of, your lawyer hasn't advised you on this point, because your lawyer would be saying the first thing the board will do if you're getting sued by Conor Benn is say, well, we want the report which supposedly shows his innocence under disclosure. So it felt like something a lawyer who is as very competent as his lawyer is would not advise, and certainly must have looked over it all afterwards and removed certain parts. But the things he said were not something you want your client to be saying on any broadcast, certainly. And that was my feeling. The difficulty is the people he's accusing. VADA is one thing, but when he's accusing the likes of the British Board of Impropriety, we all know they can't defend a case. So it's easy pickings to say you're going to sue them, basically.
Big Larry, as a man who has been through this process yourself firsthand, with UCAD, granted, not with VADA, when you sat and watched this whole interview, what were your thoughts around it?
I just thought to myself, what an idiot. Like, he made his case even worse by going on that interview. And you know, Piers was nice to him. Let's just say that. I mean, the questions that could have really been asked, you know, and even with Piers being nice to him, he just made an ass of himself. Like, he even said, I remember it clearly. He even said in that interview that he is suing the British Boxing Board partly because they shouldn't be recognizing VADA. And I thought, what? Why are you taking a VADA test then? Like, what is this all about? It just boggles the mind. And then when Piers said to him, "Okay, hand your 270-page novel to the I say novel intentionally to the British Boxing Board of Control to investigate further," he's like, "No, I've got pride." You're not helping yourself. So if you're going to sue the board, that's exactly the kind of stuff that's going to come up. He's got a top lawyer, Mike Morgan, and he's obviously not listening to what Mike Morgan is advising him to do. And, you know, not only being through the process myself, but being a pharmaceutical chemist who has great knowledge of these substances, we all know he's guilty. Instead of him just to hold his hands up and just say, "Yeah, you know what? Let me take it on the chin. I'll take the ban or whatever." You know, it'd be a lot easier and a lot. I mean, he was talking in that interview about clearing his name. Does he honestly think his name has been cleared since this whole debacle has begun? It hasn't. It's been made worse. So I can't. And now apparently he's going to fight Pacquiao in Dubai or whatever. It's just absolute nonsense, honestly. Yeah.
Niall, you've seen the great, the good. You've been close to all of them of British boxing down the years. What, as a young, upcoming, rising star, one of the headline names of British boxing, what did you make of the whole, I suppose, the whole thing to this point, really, and how it's been handled? The narrative of from when he's kind of, you know, the story came out that he'd failed through to Piers Morgan's interview.
Well, I agree with everything that your other guests have said so far. So we're all slightly in agreement that it is, as was remarked earlier on, a car crash, isn't it? I mean, two things strike me about. I think Conor probably has got on this programme because he's dipped his toes into the world of fame. And as we know with boxers, you know, when they do that, they get a little, what's the phrase? They almost, it's like moths to a light, isn't it? They love the idea of fame, and Conor's just tasting that. And you know, nobody in their right minds would have suggested it was a good idea for him to go on this program. No lawyer, no nobody. Not the case still pending, but I think he decided to go on it because it's a chance to improve his bracket's fame, which is terribly sad. But I do genuinely believe that. And the second point I'd make is this. I mean, Nigel Benn was my absolute hero as a boxer. He was the very first when he fought McClellan. And I just think Nigel should be taking the lead in this. I mean, so far all I'm seeing is just one appalling episode after another. And as Larry quite rightly points out, you don't get those levels of illegal substances in your system by eating eggs, do you? It's as rich as Tyson Fury's eating, what was it? Wild boar.
Yeah, uncastrated wild boar. Very specific.
It's just cobblers, isn't it? And you know, we've all listened to loads of sportsmen and women over the years explaining how innocent they are, and they're not, because it's found there for a reason. But those are the two observations I've got. I think Conor's got on the programme because he likes being famous all of a sudden. And I think Nigel should take some of the blame for this. He was, as I say, my absolute boxing hero. I've met him loads of times, and he's a decent, genuine bloke, especially after the ring. But if he's advising his son, he's doing a pretty bloody damn bad job of it at the moment.
What were any particular highlights any of you took away from the interview? So for me, it was Conor and Nigel both using the term witch hunt. Which I thought, mate, you're the one who's failed something here. It's surely on you to prove your innocence. It's not a witch hunt. It's just people want answers.
But every drugs cheater who's ever been caught always says the same thing, don't they? From Lance Armstrong through to countless boxers, through to countless athletes everywhere. They always say the same thing, don't they? It's a witch hunt, something's gone wrong, the system. And then ultimately we always find out that the system is perfectly in good working order. And I suspect this is the case in this occasion as well. It's not a witch hunt. He was found with an illegal substance in his body. Nobody else to blame but himself, really.
I think the thing I found the most galling, and just when Niall says that about Lance Armstrong, at least Lance didn't fail a test, let alone, he never failed a test in his career, let alone 2 in the space of a couple of months. And it was his blasé attitude to the testing process where he's like, oh, I just assumed something was wrong. He didn't stop and instantly go, oh, what has happened here? And it felt like he was accusing absolutely everyone else. But there's the witch hunt phrase I found really irritating because there's no concept of understanding what a witch hunt in fact is. That's finding someone who's in the wrong and hunting them down for something, as opposed to VADA doing exactly what their job description is. Finding substances that aren't meant to be there. That's actually the definition of a successful job. And I think that lack of understanding or lack of comprehension, that VADA finding something, he also referenced, he did this thing where he referenced his dad's fights and, essentially saying, look, I know what it's like when your father's been involved in life-altering fights, which he has in his career. And it's a huge consequence to go, oh, do you think I'd do that then? And you kind of go, but you're not giving a plausible explanation, which makes it worse.
Absolutely. I agree. Sorry, Larry.
Yeah, well, a couple of moments stuck out for me, but one of the moments that stuck out for me was when Piers said to him, and what did you feel after you failed the first test? And he was like, I didn't feel anything. I'm like, what? You didn't feel anything? Like, oh, I just assumed it was this and that and whatever. I'm just like, what? Even if you were a completely innocent athlete, you are going to feel some type of way about failing a drugs test, and it was just that attitude to me, it just stank of not only delusion, but of, entitlement. Like, oh, well, I'm Conor Benn, so, I don't get done by these kind of things, And then on top of that, Piers said to him that, well, the WBC, after all his, cries of contamination and tampering by the lab that tested the sample, Piers had to point out to him that, well, even though the WBC has, I say cleared in air quotes, they actually didn't see anything wrong with any of the procedures whatsoever. So that would entail that his 270-page novel has no evidence of that sort to show that there was any tampering whatsoever, because the WBC would have come to some conclusion in that aspect, but their conclusion was there was no evidence of tampering. So this novel that he's got, that he's saying that is so conclusive, obviously even to the WBC, who were obviously biased towards him, it's not so conclusive. So again, I just said this, as I said before, this interview just showed him in a worse light,
Larry, I agree again, Larry. What I would say is, though, boxing, as you will, I'm sure, agree with me, and I know this will, has had an appalling record in dealing with this scourge on sport. I went to an Amir Khan fight 15 years ago in Washington, where he lost a close world title fight to a fighter who afterwards was found illegal substances just in his system. What happened to that fighter? Nothing. The IBF carried on and made him their champion. Nothing happened. If we're looking for the WBC, IBF, WBA, and all the rest of the alphabet titles for the lead on how to deal with the scourge in boxing, then we're going to be shortchanged there. I mean, come on, we've got to be kidding ourselves. They have time and time again, the governing body have shown no desire whatsoever to clean up this sport. None whatsoever.
And it's very much a case of the tail wagging the dog rather than the other way round.
Yeah, one way of putting it, yeah.
And what did you make of another one that stood out to me was that he says he doesn't accept the fact that this was in his body.
Who put it there then?
Like,
can anyone
I think
sense?
oh, sorry.
No, go
I
for
think
it.
well, Isolt is going to be a much more it's going to have much more expertise in this in what I'm about to say because it's more legalese. But the reason in my mind why he went the WBC route and not the UCAD route is the two words strict liability. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
According to the World Anti-Doping code, it doesn't matter how it got into your body. The fact that it's in your body is enough. And and with all these explanations and this and that and whatever, he's got no conclusive proof that it got into the system any other way but him using the substance. So therefore, he guilty
yeah,
of using the substance. So yeah, I mean, Issel, can you kind of like clarify that, please?
Well, you've basically hit the nail on the head there. The difference again is with the WBC. So with UCAD, if this came to UCAD, they go, it's your starting point is a ban, and then if we can show it got in through means that, let's say, a contaminated product where you looked at, let's say you take your supplement and on the side of it, this shouldn't be in there, you'll be able to reduce the ban, but there's a ban. So it's like the way I've tried to explain strict liability and not in a sports context to people is you're driving your car, you're pulled in for a roadside test and your blood alcohol level is over the limit. There's no question about someone forced drink down your throat. There's a ban happening and the length of the ban then looks at how much over the limit you were or looks at other factors, but a ban is automatic. Strict liability is the onus is on you as an athlete who is in an incredibly privileged position to know what goes into your system. Mm-hmm. So even with the likes of Canelo, and Canelo is actually a very good example to explain it to people so they can see how ridiculous the Benn situation looks. Canelo got a ban because even though he went to the lengths of showing, here's where I went for dinner. This restaurant is known to have beef which has clenbuterol given to the cattle at farming stage and production stage. So whatever you view the way he approached it and however plausible you feel his excuse or reason is, he got a ban irrespective because strict liability means you're getting a bloody ban. The length of the ban is based on what you can show. And the problem for UCAD is they're sitting out in the dark, as are the British Board of Boxing Control going, all we could do here was cancel the fight because we've no basis. It's not our testing and we're not being given anything to ban him. So they're being told they're going to be sued for essentially not being able to do anything because they realistically, all they could do was say, we're not licensing the fight.
Yeah, well, they had no option. There was one bizarre case years ago involving a Scottish downhill skier who took a Vicks nasal spray, not one of those things that you shove up your nostrils. Very famous guy. I think he won the silver medal or something, which is unusual. And he was in Canada and he bought a Vicks nasal thingy for his nostrils to get rid of colds and whatever. And it was proven in the Vicks, exactly the same packaging in Canada, had a trace amount of an illegal substance. And the Vicks that he bought in Scotland doesn't or didn't. That skier was still banned. I think he got his medal taken off him. That's an example, exactly as this was saying, of strict liability. He still had it in his system. He should have known. Having said that, I felt some sympathy for him for using a Vicks nasal spray. He could prove that that's what he used and that's where it came from. But this is nonsense. I mean, you cannot have the levels of testosterone found in his by overuse of scrambled eggs. I mean, that's just, since when has that ever happened? Otherwise, it's just rubbish, isn't it?
Yeah.
There was an interesting case this week, which I'm just going to highlight because, I spend my time reading about sports doping cases, where a female cyclist was cleared. And this is where strict liability changed slightly. She was cleared and she was found completely innocent on the basis that she had actually got cross-contaminated in her system. She was giving, her dog was dying, and she was giving her dog medication. And she wasn't checking the dog's medication and didn't realise it was absorbing through her skin. Now, it was trace amounts, but this was a case of, it was so out there that they went, actually, no, this is like, you're an idiot, wear gloves if you're giving your dog's medication. But they knew there was no benefit to her, but it comes up, it's on a banned substance list. And they basically said, okay, in this instance, we're taking a view. But otherwise, unless you have really exceptional circumstances, like, it doesn't make a difference. There've been a few interesting cases over the years which aren't in boxing, but there is no testosterone. There's no excuse for that.
Well,
there's no excuse that you can get.
You say that. I wanted to pick up on one quote from it as well. I've got a few scribbled down here, but one of them, which Isolt and Larry, I'm sure you'll have your own views upon this. One of his rationales, reasonings, I don't know, was, I don't even know what this thing is. Now, interestingly, doesn't say didn't know, it says don't know. So you're still claiming you don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's absolute nonsense. Look, clomiphene citrate is a drug that's been known in athletic circles for years. It's given, its medical use is for female fertility, but its off-label use is to increase testosterone in men. It's actually used in testosterone replacement clinics as a first port of call to increase men's testosterone who are not suffering from primary hypogonadism, as opposed to secondary hypogonadism. So getting into a bit of scientific stuff here, but anyway, so it's very well known. Clomid is what they call it for short. Is very, very well known. And as a self-confessed bodybuilding enthusiast, as Conor Benn has said in multiple interviews I've seen, he said one time that if he wasn't a professional boxer, he'd be a bodybuilder. He is very aware of this substance. He's treating us all for mugs. He's very aware of this substance. And what makes me laugh is he keeps talking about, it's only trace amounts. It's only trace amounts. This is a drug that you would take after you've completed a steroid cycle to increase your natural testosterone, which would be diminished from the steroid cycle. And then obviously you having lower levels just means that the drug is metabolized in your system for a long period of time. But it doesn't mean that, it was from contamination or whatever. It just means they hadn't tested you for a long time, and now they've tested you. You've taken it X amount of time ago, and now it's been metabolized in your body to the lowest levels, but it's still there. So all of this smokescreen about it's only low levels, it wouldn't increase my performance. Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
What about? And I think we mentioned it earlier, but again, a quote from it. Talking about the labs and accusing of manipulation, manufacturing by the labs, concealing evidence, maybe an accident, maybe an error. Wow. I mean, that's, again, it's as a lawyer, when you heard that, did the alarm bells go off?
So as a lawyer, what you do at that point is you're not even contacting your client, you're crying behind or under your desk going, how? Like, the only hope, I just think, it's for VADA to see that and their labs to be accused of that. Like, you're kind of going, let's hope they're really not giving too much thought to Conor Benn, because that's such a serious accusation. It goes further than saying, like, you can say, well, maybe it could be interpreted as accidental or otherwise. It's an accusation that goes to the testers, the lab, and basically anyone who's involved in the process. Accidents do happen. Cross-contamination can happen in if we even think about it, in the most accidents can happen with testing. There have actually been some very high profile criminal cases over the years where there have been incidents where samples have been gone astray in labs, etc. But to suggest that on two separate occasions and on a B test that it all went, a B sample, obviously we know B sample is, it's split from the same. So you really, if your B sample is different, you need to be concerned. But to suggest that somewhere along that it's gone wrong on multiple occasions such that he got the same result, and now this is where I'm going to defer to your expertise. Like, what are the chances of that happening? Because I'm going with my logical brain going, I've no scientific brain. My lawyer brain says, oh my God, why would he say that on TV? And that is a really dangerous route to go down, because he clearly hasn't thought this through. But in terms of the science, for that to occur on that many occasions,
it's statistically impossible. For three, that means 3 occasions, because like you said, they tested the A sample and B sample on one of them, and then the A sample on another one. On 3 occasions, there's going to be contamination. I can understand one time, maybe if I'm being really generous, twice, but 3 times, really, like it's statistically impossible. And the thing is, VADA was and is touted as the gold standard, right? And I know why, because they have more sensitive testing equipment, and they're more readily willing to use more expensive tests, like the carbon isotope test to catch testosterone users. So as opposed to UCAD, so they are the gold standard. And so for me to believe that there is contamination, not once, not twice, but 3 times, it's just ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Niall, I wanted to...
But Mike, we've all injected a bit of humour into this because we're finding the excuses and what have you quite laughable. But I think we've also got to remember this. This is not a laughing subject, is it?
No.
We are dealing with a sport where people use pillows on their hands and damage can be caused. And Larry, as an ex-boxer, will know better than anybody that this is a sport that you've got to have. You absolutely must have a clean athlete against a clean athlete. You've got to have that because it is people's lives that we're dealing with. This is not skiing down a piste, or as Lance Armstrong was doing, cycling around France. This is boxing. It's different. So while the excuses Conor's made are just comical, this is just not a laughing matter in every other way. It is just sad. It's incredibly sad for the sport.
It's also the history of the families involved and the situation in which this came out in was Benn versus Eubank. And those gentlemen understand. They've grown up with fathers who know the consequences of the sport better than most.
Absolutely.
I do actually, and I'm actually going to ask a question. Sorry, Martin, because I do have a question. I was thinking about this watching the car crash the other night, and I was going, I wonder, given he was fighting Eubank, who obviously had to come down in a huge amount in weight, if he had held his hands up, because he said it during the interview, he said, oh, why would I wanted to prove my innocence. If he had held his hands up at the time, I wonder if we wouldn't have seen him back in a ring 7-8 months' time with people going, look, he was going to fight the bigger man, and look, it's not good for the sport, and people would have viewed it entirely differently. He has created this monster, in my opinion. And I suppose, what do you guys think? If he had just held his hands up immediately, what the reaction would have been?
I'll be brief, and that is, in numerous occasions over the years, since I was watching boxing in the early 90s, a boxer has got away with a derisory punishment, and absolutely certain the same thing would have happened to this. And until the authorities, and I mean everybody, starts dealing with this properly, same thing's going to happen again and again and again. That would be my take. Sorry, Larry.
I think, well, I have a completely different view on boxing and doping, but I won't get into that here because that's a very different argument anyway. But in terms of him admitting that, would it have gone differently? Depends. I mean, he's got Eddie Hearn in his corner who managed to spin the Dylan White situation. We still don't know what happened in that situation, to be honest with you. It's never been fully explained as to how he was allowed to get off of that. But anyway, but yeah, you're possibly right. So he could have just received a lowish ban. I mean, a la Tyson Fury.
I think
Well,
what's probably clear, like in the court of public opinion, which I realise the thresholds don't really, there's nothing too formal around that. We would all have a different view of him right now.
I think about a year ago, I looked at I think it was the WBC rankings for the heavyweights. I think it was the C. It might be the A, so I'll stand corrected. And about a year ago, it's 7 out of the top 10 fighters had been done for some sort of drug thing, which suggests it's an epidemic, doesn't it? Either that or they're just not throwing the book in anybody. As particularly, I think Conor Benn would have got away with a relatively short ban.
Yeah. Look, I'm conscious of time for you all. It's been fascinating. I could sit here and talk all night about it with you, and I'm sure there are areas of the program, the car crash, whatever we want to label it as, that we could delve far deeper into. But I appreciate all your time for doing this. I'm sure this will rumble on, and I'm sure it'd be lovely to get back together in a week or so and find out the next episode of where we're at. So Larry, Niall, Isolt, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Pitch Boxing, it's been a pleasure.